Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, your Las Vegas Raiders beat writer on SI and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider podcast. It's great to be with you today. I want to address, before we get into our 10th and final, um, 10th and final of the 10 things facing the Raiders, we're just going to get right into it because the first topic at hand gets to it. And this is the intangibles. This is the intangibles as the Raiders come into training camp. We start with Christian Wilkins. I've told you all along, everyone that I have spoken to expects him to play when the season starts. So it was announced that the Raiders put him on the PUP, but he's on the PUP active list. So what that means is that anytime they can bring him back, but he's not counting against one of the slots if they bring in another player. Now, they can activate him at any moment and he can start playing and practicing. If when roster cutdown days come, if he's still on the PUP list, then he misses a minimum of the first 4 games. But he's on that PUP active, so he can still come back at any point. I have not had time today to ask people if they still anticipate him being back for the start of the season. So the last report I got was maybe he would go on the active pup. That did happen, but people were still hopeful he would play during the year. I mean, at the beginning of the year. I've not heard anything differently yet, but I have not talked to anyone yet. I will be on that, I promise. So when you look at the intangibles with this Raider season, Christian Wilkins is a huge intangible. Malcolm Kuntz is a guy that has given every indication he's back, and I fully believe he is. And I think he's back at the level we saw at the end of 23. But it's still an intangible. It's going to have to show it with pads on. Christian, going to have to show that he's back. You know, you look at Eric Stokes, Devin White, Raheem Mostert, all have to prove they're back. But there are other intangibles. What other injuries will come? And they will. Remember, I have said to you before, the teams that win the Super Bowl are not usually the most talented in their first string. It's the deepest, meaning the most talent that's able to step up. This is why when you look at trading a Dylan Parham if he doesn't win the job, or you look at a Thayer Mumford, and when you get rid of depth, especially young depth, it's very difficult because you need depth to win championships, but you're not right there right now. You are one injury away then from a trade of a Dylan or Thayer being a moment. And when you look, intangibles are an enormous part of any season. You have to look at, you've got to investigate, and you have to take into that account. Mr. Murphy always shows up. How do you deal with the intangibles? There's a lot of new guys on this coaching staff, and it's a good staff. But anytime you add a bunch of new people, there's going to be people dynamics. Think about where you were. If you added 10 new people, what are the chances that maybe there's personality clashes or difference of opinions on how to do things? This is why culture is so big. This is why culture is so enormous. I was asked recently on a national show, do I think Raider fans are as excited now as they've been my entire time covering the team? I said, no. I said, they're very optimistic. But they've been beat up a little bit. And I talked about Mark Davis's comments the other day, which I thought were genius, when he literally said, hey, we got to get past hope. We got to be results oriented. And I talked about the fan base. Mark echoed the fan base. Now, No, we got to be results based. That's a good deal. That's doable. But when you look at number 10, it's the intangibles. All right. The thought was after Christian was injured last year, he'll be ready for at least mandatory minicamp. Then I heard, yeah, we expect him ready for training camp. Then, well, I heard this back during the OTA minicamp season. Nah, probably be back. Expect him back for the start of the regular season. But you don't know because every benchmark of expectation has not been reached yet. Now, I got to address one thing real quick because some are going to take that as a critical statement of Christian. There is nothing critical. He has done every single thing asked of him. Every single last one. Everyone. This is nothing to do with being lazy. It's nothing to do with being unwilling to work, not putting in the time. Christian's been rock star. But these are intangibles. All right. You got a couple of young guys. Brock Powers last year was a rock star the entire season. Will there be a sophomore jinx? No. You don't expect it. But the fact that what he did last year, it was awesome. You look at all the guys now who are trying to resurrect their careers. I talked to you about a bunch of guys who were injured the other day. Do you expect all of them to be back? That'd put the Raiders in rarefied air. But when you figure in intangibles, that's a very big deal. I mean, Malcolm Kuntz last year was an intangible that nobody saw coming. Max Crosby had a okay year, a good year. And when you look at it in the context of his injury, it was a really good year. But can you imagine if he would have been healthy and then you had a healthy Malcolm and a healthy Christian? It would have not even been the same defense. And so this is something that fans sometimes don't take into account is the intangibles. What are the intangibles? What are the things that you maybe haven't planned for, but you have to think about? So let's talk about a couple of those. All right? You look at the future of this team. I talked to you about the past and present, but we haven't talked about the future. The Raiders are in a really unique spot because it has been so bad for so long that they have to guard themselves against apathy setting in on their fan base. Now, I'm going to say something to you, and I want you to hear my heart. I do not believe the Raiders fan base is apathetic, but I think it's very frustrated and very worn out. And when you look to the future, I can't tell you the number of emails and people that I meet who are like, man, my kids, they're rooting for other teams because the Raiders just don't win. You don't want to raise a generation of young Raider fans where grandpa and grandma, mom and dad are Raider fans, where they become apathetic to your team. You're not going to lose the 50-year-olds. They're still going to tune in. They're going to be mad. They're still going to tune in. You can't afford, if you're a franchise that is as stellar as the Raiders, as important to professional sports as the Raiders, you can't lose an entire generation with a constantly retrying. It doesn't work. Last year in New England isn't going to ruin the New England fan base. But 20 years of it would hurt it. The Raiders They've used 20 years of mulligans, 20 years of it. Now it's up to them. And when you talk about intangibles, you got to talk about the future. What does that future look like? Mark Davis has done a brilliant job setting this team up with the best team headquarters, the best stadium, one of the wealthiest franchises as far as money producers in the NFL. He's brought in some great co-owners, minority owners. He's bringing in a Hall of Fame coach. There are no more excuses. You go get a top 10 to 15 quarterback, right? Is he your Jim Plunkett? No. Is he your Kenny Stabler? No. But he's a top 10 to 15 quarterback, and he's a guy that sets the stage for you to eventually draft and develop the next guy that you think is your Kenny Stabler. Or maybe they feel they've got that in Aiden. They very well might. Not saying he is, but they may see him and say, listen, we developed Geno. We think Aiden has that ability. Then you're golden. But the future of this franchise is one of the intangibles. You as a team, I was told this one time, and I think it was Dave Ziegler who told me this. If I'm wrong, I apologize to Dave. But I was talking to an NFL general manager, and no, it wasn't Dave. It was another NFL general manager. I remember now who it was. I apologize, Dave. Um, and he said to me, the hardest part of my job is not building a roster. That surprised me. He said the hardest part of my job is anticipating who I'm going to bring in when Mr. Murphy hits. So let me give you an example. The reason this guy and I had that conversation was I had heard his team brought in a player for a workout. So fans automatically assume, oh, they're going to sign this guy. Sometimes they're bringing guys in just to know where you are physically in case Mr. Murphy. And the guy that I'm talking about, this particular general manager, brought a guy in. And so I called him about this guy. I said, hey, tell me about this. What are you thinking? He says, I'm just trying to make sure he's healthy because if one of my guys at that position gets injured, he's the first call I'm making. Mm. All right. That's why sometimes there'll be free agents who will wait. They may have a general manager say, listen, we're really thin. And if these guys don't perform, I'm going to bring you in and here's what I'm going to pay you. So they may be willing because they agree as a player, yeah, they're really thin. They're going to call me. So they may not take a spot. I remember a couple of years ago, there was a guy that the Raiders liked, called him, talked to him, and had told him, if something happens, you're our guy. It ended up the Raiders didn't need to call him, but he was well and prepared. He had a couple chances to go somewhere, but wanted to wait on the Raiders. Didn't work out. So he ended up late in the year signing with another team. But all of those are intangibles. If you think John Spytek's job is just putting together the 53, you're wrong. It's a big part of it, but he's got to know, where are my numbers? Okay, if I lose a guy at a position, if it's a young guy, what direction am I going? If it's a veteran that's a key leader, where am I going? Do I trust the young guy to come up, or do I have a veteran on speed dial? There's all of that that goes into it. That's why there's so many importance with relationships with agents and players. It's talking about, hey, listen, if I get this, here's what I'm going to do. Are you in? Yes. And so the intangibles right now are a massive part. And I want you to hear me. Massive part of what the Raiders are facing going into training camp. And we're sitting here taping this on a Friday afternoon. Okay. And they show up Tuesday. We are less than 4 days away. until the season begins. And there's going to be a lot of intangibles, the expected and the unexpected. I remember one time, um, I think it was Brett Bielema with Wisconsin. May have been someone else, but I think it was Brett Bielema at Wisconsin. And he got in there, and man, could his offensive line coach was a disaster, and fired him and went with it, promoted a GA. With all the new staff, it's not uncommon for one of them not to work out. I think this is a pretty solid group, and they've all got a good relationship, and Pete really did a good job. I'm not anticipating it, but it's an intangible. Injuries, intangibles. Growth, intangibles. Intangibles. And lastly, injuries, intangibles. As the Raiders head to training camp, the name of the game, the biggest thing facing them, intangibles. Follow me on IG and Threads at Hondo SR, on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Hondo Carpenter. And as always, nobody's pumping out more content for you than us. We are pumping that stuff out, giving you the best free Raiders coverage. And don't forget, when training camp starts, video, tons of video every day, articles. You don't want to miss it. We'll see you. And don't forget, still podcasts coming at you every single day. Camp's getting closer. We'll see you all tomorrow.